Hello and welcome, everybody, to our series of hydrogen talk. Today about, it's always an important topic, but today it's really, really important. It's about the infrastructure. And our question that we tackle is, will the grids package propel hydrogen infrastructure to the next level? My name is Yorgo Chatzimarkakis. Go to the next slide. I'm the CEO of Hydrogen Europe, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you all here and to tell you we have an excellent and high-level panel today with people who can make us understand better where we are with regards to the grids package. If we come to the next slide, we will see Dan Jørgensen, the Danish Commissioner for Energy, who says if we want a Europe that is clean, competitive, and independent, we need our energy infrastructure to be stronger, more secure, and more connected. I happened to witness or to be part of one of his first big meetings last year when he was commissioner, when he talked about affordability. And he said one thing that struck me very much. He said, if you want to have affordable energy, we need to use all infrastructure that we have. If we just focus on one infrastructure, sometimes people think Commission is concentrating very much on electricity. This is not true. He says it's 3.5 infrastructures, 3.5 grids. It's electricity, it's gas, it's hydrogen, and the half stands for CO2, because we will also need a CO2 grid. And that's what he says, that will make energy affordable, to combine all these three basically grids. And what he also says is, there we are way ahead, 10 to 20 years ahead of the States and of China, because that's where our strength lies. Mrs. von der Leyen, the Commission President, said, we will implement European energy highways. The first energy highway has just been agreed. That is the Bornholm Island with the Baltic offshore wind, now connected to Denmark and to Germany. And I myself, I was at the North Sea Summit, where basically this was a big topic. And indeed, it happens. We will come to some of these connections later on. Next slide shows that in a very funny way, there is no energy union without hydrogen grids. Why is it so? Because, and that's also one of the lessons I learned at the North Sea Summit, where many countries were represented, all the North Sea countries, including UK, Norway, and Iceland. And what I learned there is that up to 1/3 of the energy that we produce offshore in the North Sea, so renewable green electricity, is curtailed, which means that this energy is not used. It's just shut down. It's not used because of the congestion in the electricity grids. And this could be helped by hydrogen grids, because you can easily turn electricity, easily, inverted commas or not inverted commas, it always depends on where you come from, easily transform into hydrogen and then use existing or repurposed or new hydrogen pipelines in order to bring that same energy or the feedstock, because it's strategic molecules, to the consumers or to the places it needs to go. So which pipelines do we have and what is planned? Next slide shows that there are already concrete projects that happen. The place I know very best, it's my home region, Saarland. It's one of the oldest connection, and it's quite soon to be accomplished. I think from the ones here, it's the first one. It's Mosaic. You see it on the left-hand side. It's short, 94 kilometers, but it's quite advanced, and it will connect the production area of northeastern France, Lorraine, with especially with Saarland. And this is important because we have steel company there using green hydrogen for clean steel production. Very, very cool. And I've witnessed it myself. So it really happens. One of the most prominent is H2Med. It's connecting Portugal and Spain, so the Iberian Peninsula via France with the Central European markets, especially in Germany. But we have lots of activities in the north of Europe, especially connecting Finland via the Baltic countries and Poland, again to Germany, to a certain extent also to the chemical centers, chemical industrial centers in Central Eastern Germany. And electrolytic hydrogen supply outlook looks versus the regulatory demand in 2030. So will we be able to synchronize the demand that we have in certain areas with the deployment of pipelines? And this is all part of the grids package. Let us have a look at the grids package. It consists of three different elements. The first one is the EU grids communication, where we talk about, or the Commission talks about, the integrated planning. This 10-year development plan process foresees clear scenarios, and this is a part of it. The energy highways that Mrs. von der Leyen alludes to are part of this communication, but also how to fund a cross-border project, how to de-risk this investment, because investments into electricity are more costful than into hydrogen, but still they both cost money, and how to de-risk this. The second part of the grids package are the amendments to the 10E regulation and its annexes. 10E stands for Trans-European Networks. And here we have a status of PCI, that's the common interest projects of common interest. And if you get this label of a PCI, you already are in a very privileged position. And this second part of the grids package also regulates how the application process for such a PCI label looks like. The third element of the grids package are the amendments to the Renewable Energy Directive third recast, the Electricity Directive, and the Gas Directive. Here we talk about how to accelerate the permitting processes, how to exempt basically environmental impact assessments, and what is the overriding public interest that makes such investments more important and in the end faster. By the way, the Germans have just presented an acceleration act, an acceleration law that now is in discussion of the major parties in Germany that are in government. And it looks very much like public interest is connected to hydrogen in certain areas, and the exemption of environmental impact assessment will be possible, and so the permitting will be accelerated. So it's very, very concrete, and it happens in member states. So what are the key aspects, next slide please, for the hydrogen sector? So the grids package communication consists four very important elements. One is how to integrate the planning, and in order to avoid curtailment, in order to avoid higher costs through congestion, how to ensure a better system integration. Some also call it sector coupling, but I was told by native speakers, English native speakers, that sector coupling is not a good word, Sektorenkopplung in German, but system integration or sector integration is the better word. The second part, I alluded to it, is how to de-risk the cross-border infrastructure. There are nice elements for de-risking in national contexts, but how to do it cross-border. Then, which are the energy highways? Is there any methodological approach, any methodology, a matrix, how to select the energy highways? We will see in a few minutes which have been selected by the European Commission. And of course, the fourth part is the permitting process, how to streamline that permitting. Let's have a look at the energy highways. Next slide. And here you see the, well, for some surprising map that shows which energy highways have been presented in that grids package. Again, this is part of a discussion and can be amended, and there might be energy highways that can be included or added. Where is the northern part? So we said already that there is a lot of activities especially in Finland, and this is not so far not included here. But what we see is that there are two energy highways for hydrogen. So you see the yellow lines here are the electricity highways. The pink, purple are the gas highways. They also play a role. And green is quite prominently represented here. That's the South H2 corridor connecting Algeria and Tunisia via Italy with Austria, partly also Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Germany. And the already mentioned H2 Med, so the southwest corridor from Iberian Peninsula to Germany. Again, missing the Nordic Baltic hydrogen corridor, which is not mentioned yet. Let me come to my last slide before we come to our keynote speaker. That's the timeline. So this grids package has been presented 15th of December. Then the council has discussed this already. There has been a working party on energy discussing the grids package in January. The European Parliament and the relevant ITRE committee, Industry and Technology, Research and Energy Committee, has chosen the rapporteurs. And the two co-rapporteurs are Svetlana Penkova and Niels Fuglsang, both from the S&D, Social Democratic Group. But the shadows, and we have one shadow, which will take the floor in a minute, are Anna Stürk from Renew, so the Liberal Group, Andrea Wexler from EPP, and Virgil Daniel Popescu, also from EPP. He shares this because it's a big file with Andrea Wexler. So what will happen next is that there will be a second redraft by the Cypriot presidency in March, so not long time in the future. Then there will be also a Minister Energy Council debate also in March. And then the discussion in Parliament starts, and the vote is foreseen for July 2026. What to expect from this? Next slide shows us the name of our keynote speaker today. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome Anna Stürk. She's member of the Renew Group. She's a shadow rapporteur, as I said, for her group. And she's with the NEOS party. This is a party, a liberal party in Austria. She focuses on policies related to industry, research, energy, but is also very, very actively involved into environmental consumer protection issues. And when I visited your Congress last year, I haven't visited ALDE Congresses for many, many years, for 15, 20 years. And then I asked, who's the next big star? And people told me about your name. So, Anna, the next big star, already a star in the European Parliament of the, hopefully, ALDE party. You have the floor. Tell us your view on the grids package. Grüß Gott.
Einen wunderschönen guten Tag. Thank you so much for having me, and a warm hello from my side. I don't even know where to start with this introduction, but yeah, hello from me. I'm very fittingly currently sat in a place that, let's say, has a lot of opportunity when it comes to creating new interconnectors. So not to use the word bottleneck too much. From what you've just seen with the energy highways, you can probably now guess where I am, but that's not the most important aspect. Um, these are very exciting times, at least for energy infrastructure policy nerds such as us. And my goal for today is, on the one hand, give you an understanding of where do we stand. I mean, we just saw the timeline, but also give you a bit of a behind the scenes look and a little bit of an understanding as to, at least from my point of view, where the big crunch points are. Now, these aren't all just related to hydrogen, but that is clear in a policy or in a legislation that is so broad and is covering so much ground. So after the Commission published its grid package, obviously at the end of last year, the Council, as we just saw, has already started the working party and working groups, and they've been very active as far as we can tell, with lots of meetings both with DTN and amongst themselves, with a clear goal to have a first council statement or a first council position before the summer. Now, the Parliament is finally ready to start work too after the allocation, and we just heard why do we have several rapporteurs on this, and why does EPP have several shadow rapporteurs? Because as we just saw, the grids package is made up of several different and distinct files, and two of those are legislative proposals. On the one hand, the TNE proposal, on the other hand, the permitting proposal, and those two were split with regards to responsibility as to who gets to negotiate. In a lot of parties or a lot of groups, not all of them, both the Greens and us have decided to keep it with one rapporteur. So I think to say, first of all, I think vote in the Parliament for July. I think that's going to be pushing it a little bit, but we'll try our best. Maybe at least we can get the committee vote through before the summer. We're, to be completely honest, not expecting a vote in plenary until after the summer, but we haven't received any official timelines yet. That is just my feeling. And I think one of the main things, or the first things to say, at least from the parliamentary perspective, because of the way that the parliament works and because of the file being shared, one of the first things we'll have to look at as a parliament is to make sure that we do still look at these files together and that we streamline the negotiations of those two files. Because there's not gonna be a point in having a full-on parliamentary position on TENI when we haven't even properly looked at the permitting part yet. So that is going to be the first thing that the Parliament is going to have to look at. But let me just, before I go into some of the details, say that the positive thing I think about this package is that there is very clearly a strong agreement that it is a good thing in general that the Commission is looking at the topic of grids, of energy grids. We are in the middle of a transition of our system, of our energy system, and it is high time that we don't just look at the production side, but that we actually look at the system as a whole, so also including grids. So that is a good starting point. The fact that everyone actually agrees that it needs this legislative proposal rather than having to fight over the question of, do we even want this? So, as I said, good starting point. But did the Commission deliver what we expected from it? And is it going to be enough? Is it what we need from it? So what maybe is our first verdict? And there are some aspects where there seems to be quite broad support and a common understanding. The main part, or the main one, would be in general the permitting. So while there's still definitely a couple of paragraphs that we'll need to look into, a couple of articles that aren't clear or where we maybe think that this needs to be done in a better way, I have yet to meet someone who doesn't in principle agree with what is being done in the permitting part, because also a lot of what is being done now for grids, we already had for renewables, for example, renewable production in RED 3. So by mirroring a lot of what is already practice for another part of energy infrastructure is obviously giving us quite a lot of not just control, but I guess general agreement, and it makes it a lot easier to implement this. Um, so again, yes, there's a couple of things we have to look into there, but in general, I think there seems to be quite a lot of agreement. And I actually myself got to visit just a couple of days ago the South H2 corridor project in my home country, Austria, and there again we talked about this, and it is very clear that a lot of things and aspects that come into the permitting part will be needed and are good. But before I go into those crunch points that I mentioned in the beginning that I want to pass on to you or give you, I want to give you a little bit of, as I said, behind the scenes information. And I think for us, the overall observation of the first informal discussions and exchanges we had both amongst MEPs, but particularly also with stakeholders, is that the first observation of the package is that there is a lack of clarity in a lot of the articles and a lot of the I guess, intentions of the commission. And actually, that lack of clarity makes the discussions we're having a little bit hard because we find out that if we don't start our meetings with actually sitting down and finding a common understanding of what the commission actually means by certain, sometimes even words, but particularly by some of the provisions, then we end up having discussions maybe for an hour that aren't fruitful at all because at the end we find out that we have the exact same idea, but we just had different approaches and different understandings of what the law actually says. And so that doesn't necessarily make it any easier. And it is, in my opinion, and I think also going to be quite a bit of a hurdle for us going forward. But I think that is actually, on a very meta level, the biggest weakness of the proposal. Now, as I said, at the end of the meetings, a lot of times we realize that once we have a common understanding of how we want to read the proposal, we actually find a lot of agreement with lots of stakeholders and within the parliamentary groups. So that is a positive. And I do want to say as well, in defense of the Commission, now I understand that the Commission was trying to keep this as neat as possible and not to become too descriptive, because if you read the 10E version we have right now, that's current legislation, it is very, very descriptive. And so I understand that, we're trying to write readable laws, and that's an honorable goal, but we have to make sure that in doing so, we're not creating legal uncertainty in the process. So the main task, in my opinion, apart from actually finding the right wordings, will be to even find certain wordings and to clarify some of the aspects that the Commission has put in without becoming too descriptive and thereby narrowing or really putting, let's say, boundaries or too tight of a boundary onto this topic. So having said that, I'd like to, obviously there would be loads of different aspects that we could look into, and I know that this is only going to be the first discussion on this topic of, I'm sure, will be many. But I did want to pick out three major points of contention that I have, or that have presented themselves to us so far in all of our meetings. So the first, and this is probably not going to come as a huge surprise, I will go straight into the new planning process, and I will say the central scenario. So from our point of view, and you know that the Parliament has in the last year come out with an initiative report, at least on electricity grids. We didn't cover hydrogen, but that was just based or purely because we had constraints in terms of how much we could write. So we had to focus. But there already we showed that what we want to achieve is a more streamlined process, more cross-sectoral approach, more clarity and transparency for all actors, including scientific community, less political intervention based on not real constraints, but national and sometimes party politics. Now, what is, in my opinion, the biggest contention when it comes to the central scenario? That is the biggest question that comes up, and it's from several actors, obviously TSOs quite a lot, but in general, several actors, is the big question of, does the Commission actually have the capacity and experience to provide such central scenarios? But again, this brings me to my first and more meta point. The real question is, what does the Commission actually mean by the central scenario? And I know that you'll hear from Katarina later, who I'm sure will provide you with some more details and insights and views on this. So I'll keep this brief. But what is clear to us is that what has to be in the final negotiation result, in the final compromise, is that the basis of our planning, of course, has to remain the expertise of the TSOs, and in particular, the technical constraints of the individual national systems. That is clear. And the Commission actually says this as well. Why they didn't put it in it, as clearly, I don't know, but they say this is their goal as well. So we have to find a compromise where we appreciate and prove that the important knowledge of TSOs are still the basis, but that we have a more European strategic outlook at the planning process. And just one word on hydrogen in this regard is that what I find very interesting is that so far a lot of the conversations I've had with TSOs that provide hydrogen infrastructure, they've actually been a lot more open to the question of such central scenarios than, for example, electricity TSOs. I just This is my personal observation, no claim to it being the reality or the truth, but this is my personal observation. And again, I wanted to take you a little bit behind the scenes. The second major point is when it comes, now we come into the money question. And that's where it's all at, isn't it? At the end. So the second really big point of contention where I think just today we saw some newspaper articles about France and Sweden really going against the question of how the congestion revenues can be used, or rather the 25% of congestion revenue that should be used and provided for PCIs. Now, as I said, why is it such a crunching point? We see some countries going really hard against this. And it, again, I think is an example of where it's the lack of clarity that brings us into this position where we have differing opinions. Because something that I've heard from all or almost all nation states was that they were concerned that they could not use this revenue anymore to support, in particular, national lines that were the backbone of interconnectors. So if I take my own country as an example, we as Austria, we have some bottlenecks. We know that, and if you look at the fact that we are needed to have the transmission between, for example, Germany and Eastern Europe. But then the question is, even if we have new interconnectors between Germany and Austria and Hungary, for example, or Slovakia or Slovenia, wherever you want to go, but we don't have the national grid to actually support that transfer, then what's the point? So there's a lot of fear that through these 25% that are supposed to be, earmarked or blocked for PCI projects will harm the national grid build out. And now what we hear from the Commission, to give you that as well, is that when we look at congestion revenue, then obviously this is already dealt with in the EMD. There are the three priorities that are set out. And currently, what they're saying is actually the 25%, it's not from the congestion revenue overall, but it is once you've spent money on priority A, which is increasing cross-zonal capacity, and once you've spent money on priority C, which is offshore connection, then 25% has to be blocked for PCIs. And those PCIs will only be or the 25% will only be used for PCIs that actually are based in the country where the revenue is collected. Again, this is something where even after reading the legislative proposal, there was a lot of disagreement on, and we do not read that as descriptively as the Commission is saying what they wanted. And so I think this is again an example where we will find a compromise. I'm actually pretty sure, because we have similar needs and wants. It's just a question of how do we frame it and how do we phrase it in a way that makes clear that what this is about is making sure that actually the congestion revenue that isn't being used, which is quite a lot. I mean, I think even only in Germany, I think we're talking about just over 1 billion that wasn't used over the last few years. So that is a lot of money that is, or at least seems to be, just lying around. So we need to make sure that we actually use that. And just to bring me to my third point, I will keep with financing and look at this question. And you've kind of raised it already in the slides, Jorgo, is this general approach and this general question, not just of de-risking, which is obviously in particular for hydrogen, such an important question, but in general, the question of who pays for the infrastructure that actually helps everyone. And we know that we've had the concept of cross-border cost allocation already. We have the inter-TSO compensation mechanism already there, but it doesn't seem to be working in the way that it should. Because when you look at it, a lot of planned interconnectors aren't happening, and a lot of them aren't happening because there's no agreement as to who has to pay for it, or because the nation states that should pay for it right now, because they are built on their on their national properties, then they say, why should our people have to pay for an interconnector that others benefit from? So while there are a lot of, I guess, good pushes in the proposals that we see when it comes to the question of how do we actually calculate the benefit of an interconnector, then really pushing regional cooperation further, being able to bundle projects in calculating both the benefits and thereby also then the costs. I think there's a lot of good aspects in there. The only question that we have is, will it be enough? And I think if you allow me to just talk about at least my opinion on hydrogen when it comes to that, I think what we see with hydrogen as well is we actually have two questions to answer here. Because on the one hand, we need to have legislation that is long lasting and that actually covers the questions of planning and building infrastructure over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And we have to have good, again, cost allocation, cost benefit analysis, etc., for those years. But with hydrogen, we have an even bigger hurdle, right? And we saw it in your presentation, this focus on de-risking, this question of this isn't necessarily just about infrastructures that we're used to. It's not like an electricity grid where we know it's going to be used. We already have the demand, we have the supply. But instead, we're at a point where the question is, it almost feels to me from outside of the industry like a little bit of a game of chicken, right? Nobody really wants to pile up supply until we have the demand. Nobody really wants to change their demand to hydrogen until they have the right supply. And everyone is also waiting for the grids. But obviously, no one wants to invest in a grid where they don't know whether it's actually going to be used. So, this question, I think, we're gonna have to look very closely to make sure that we put in this legislation that we currently have in front of us the best possible aspects for both de-risking, but especially this question of cross-border cost allocation. And then I think on top of that, we have to ask, is this legislation enough? And is it actually the right place to solve all of the questions that we have, in particular when it comes to the question of hydrogen infrastructure and that first initial investment? I'm personally not sure what the right answer is on that. So I'm really looking forward also in the next few months to hearing from all of you and lots of you, because you are the ones with the expertise here. And I think just to sum it up, I hope that I showed you that even with the crunch points, I think maybe I'm too positive, but I have a very positive outlook at this process at the moment because I think we all agree with the goals. Maybe not necessarily on the path there yet, but I'm sure we'll get there because I think a lot of the points again are down to misunderstandings and just different understandings of what we actually have in front of us. So I think once we manage to get that out of the way, we will find compromise. At the same time, so that I don't end on a too positive note, I mean, these are still difficult times, so we have to talk about that as well. But we can't expect this European legislation to make all of our problems go away, because at the end of the day, we still have a lot of constraints simply based on the fact that we have different national approaches. And I think particularly when it comes to hydrogen, we see this as well. I mean, Jorgo, you mentioned Germany as a positive example of things moving very fast. And that is true and that is great. But at the same time, when you then have to connect to Austria to actually make the infrastructure work quite well, and Austria hasn't even finalized a law that provides a regulator or that calls on a regulator for hydrogen infrastructure, well, then we're not going to move forward. So, as much as we need to focus on this European legislation, let's all keep in mind that we still have to push and keep pushing nation states to harmonize everything they can do on their level and to make sure that they actually implement both European legislation but also their own legislation as quickly as possible because we don't have any time to lose. And I'll leave it at that. And I hope that despite not having any slides, I was able to take you along a little bit on this very starting point of the negotiations.
Absolutely. And thanks very much for giving us some insights and in the machinery room of the parliament. Where are you there? And what we're discussing, your 3 points were quite clear. Maybe I start with the central planning point and just to understand you correctly, because you say TSOs should be taken also in future into account. We will hear later on from, especially from Christoph in our discussion, who basically brings in the expertise of TSOs plus represents the regulator of regulators, so the NOH. So I have heard from ENSO E and ENSO G that they would like to keep a little bit more of a say in that whole process, which now seems to be put more into the hands of the Commission. Is that something you mean? You also have heard, and how would you react on that?
Well, I think, it's very clear that everyone, is arguing for their own interests, and I think that's fair. And that's what democracy also should be about. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle, because what's important is to make sure that, again, I don't think anyone is in doubt that TSOs have the best knowledge of their grid and also of the opportunities of their grids and of the constraints of their grids. So all the information and data that we have right now and that are being used right now still need to be the basis for the planning. Now, in my opinion, actually, the proposal from the Commission, again, it can be clarified, but it doesn't necessarily go against that idea. Yes, ENTO E might not be playing, or ENTO G might not be playing as big a role as they are in the current process. But the data and the knowledge from individual TSOs must still be at the center of this planning process.
Then money. One important project or thing here you mentioned is de-risking. So again, one member state has come up with a clear de-risking strategy for their so-called core grid. That's Germany, with the amortization model. Still on European level, there is no real de-risking model so far, and everybody wants to understand better how this amortization could work. It's all about synchronization. You alluded very well to the chicken and egg issue. Is the amortization model something that you as members of parliament would look into and possibly amend to the grids package to bring as an amendment?
I think that's exactly the question that I tried to bring up in the end is we have to look very carefully at where is the right place for each individual aspect. So we'll have to be very careful and very clear in whether such an amortization model can be actually put in TENI, for example, in a clear way. But I think if I may, just one sentence about that, because I think as much as we always like to have European solutions, I think actually what Germany is doing here, for me, that's the best example of why the European Union is and could be even stronger, because you have one nation state trying out something, right? Being a forerunner, and everyone else can look and learn. And I think that is something that so we will also obviously keep a very close eye on to see how does this develop in Germany. Almost Germany taking this fall for everyone else to try out this new mechanism.
Excellent. I like very much your words on clarity, because maybe to say this in the end of our discussion here, I witnessed 5 heads of government 10 days ago in Antwerp take the floor, including your prime minister, your Bundeskanzler from Austria, taking the floor on that. And it struck me very, very much that they agreed upon one thing. They said, if the unclarity of European regulation prevails, and I quote President Macron, he said, we will go into a new wave of alliances, possibly 6, 7, 8 member states, to disregard European complexity and to start something new. This is major. This is new, including Austria, because here we are at a very, very important juncture of European development, European integration. Continue the Commission model or not. So I was quite surprised about this, and many people were in the room, but that was the mood in that council meeting. And so please, European Parliament, make clear that clarity is there in simplification, and then we don't need to change to a new European Union. Who knows? Thank you. Thank you, Anna, for your support and for your keynote.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings me to our panel, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome here on our panel distinguished panelists. We will later on start with Irina Michaela Reis. She's the team leader at the European Commission at DG Enner in the unit C4. And she is one of the co-authors, if you wish, of the proposal of the European Commission. We will listen to Olli Sippilä, the CEO of Gas Grid Finland, Tilman Wilhelm, he is the head of public affairs and communications of DVGW, Deutscher Verein für Gas- und Wasserwirtschaft. Christoph von dem Busche, he is the director of Gascade Gas Transport and the first president of NOH, the new entity. And of course, we already were told about Katharina Sikov-Magni, who is professor of the Florence School of Regulation. And I would like to start with Irina by basically letting her elaborate a little bit on, well, the ideas that the Commission had. The package is a major legislative initiative launched by you in December. The big groups have two rapporteurs. That shows already how important and how big the package is. It aims at strengthening, modernizing, and better coordinating Europe's energy infrastructure. In your opinion, Irina, what are the most important and impactful elements introduced by this initiative for the development of the hydrogen infrastructure? And what was the Commission rationale behind selecting the two particular energy highways for hydrogen, the Southwest and the South corridors? Irina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the question. In fact, you and Anna actually simplified a lot my intervention here, or answer to this question, because many elements were already highlighted. And the key points that Anna has mentioned, a majority of those are really relevant also for the hydrogen sector. Maybe I will then avoid to repeat things. I will stay with some elements that may be a bit kind of a second layer of information, a bit more detailed. But before even going there, I just want to mention one important thing, because the congestion revenues were mentioned, this 25%. This element is not related to the hydrogen sector. We do not have infrastructure yet into place to really think of the congestion revenues. So this element is purely for the electricity sector, and it is a contingent element. We've seen how member states react to it, but overall, I just want to say this is not pertaining to our discussion today. But maybe I pick up some points, and with regards to the TENI, and also maybe to go along and maybe explain few things, and I hope I can bring a bit more clarity, but we still have a few more months to bring even more clarity in discussion with the Parliament and the Council. So a few things to bring clarity to with regards to the TENI, and here I'm going to focus on elements that also impact the hydrogen sector. So the planning was mentioned initially as being one of the key developments within the TENI, key concerns, and the central scenario was mentioned. Now, one important element to highlight with regards to the scenarios: yes, the Commission is in the lead of developing the scenarios. Yes, the member states have a bigger role in the scenario development. But what it is important to highlight that the TSOs do play a key role in delivering the data for the scenarios. So their role, as they have it today, with regards to data collection, with regards to data analysis, this is also will continue to be their role in the new framework. So the specificities at the national level, the regional elements that are relevant to be included within a planning exercise will be included within the scenario development. This is something that from the beginning it was clear to us, because the TSOs, as was also previously highlighted, do have the knowledge on the ground, and it's important to include their insight into the planning part. Now, maybe staying a bit on the planning and still on the hydrogen element. So the scenario is common with electricity, hydrogen, natural gas. With regards to needs identification for the hydrogen sector, this will pertain only to the to NOH. So they will be responsible of developing the European needs identification report. But here we have, I would put it as a caveat or as a framework also for the needs identification, because in this case, we asked ACER to actually take the role of developing a framework guidance for the needs identification. So here, again, we want to give a bit more clarity. We want the regulators to be involved within the process so that the needs that are to be identified, they are clear. And also within this process, member states have a stronger role, and they have an endorsement role for the needs identification. So again, here we see a bit more. We want to make sure we have more cohesion across the outcomes of this European exercise, so that also the discussions on the implementation of the projects that are identified will be easier later on. With regards to maybe cross-border cost benefit analysis, there we have a similar approach as in the current NOH will be the one responsible of the CBA methodology. So in this case, nothing really controversial we expect to come from the CBA article itself. Now, maybe on the permitting, because this was also mentioned, this is important also for the hydrogen. Here, I could say there are some improvements for the hydrogen. We do have the single point of contact for the projects. We do have cutoff dates for the request of information from developers, so the competent authorities cannot move some of the deadlines. There's a clear 2-year deadline, extendable by up to 1 year, after which it is a tacit approval. So this is something new, and this is something really important. So the projects are not dragged. We have digitalization requirements. So again, things to move a bit fast, the information to be electronically available. Sounds little, but I think is really, really important and offers a lot of visibility, and also information at a very faster pace than we had now. And with regards to overriding public interest, that it does allow the member states to actually allocate or to designate this overriding public interest label if they wish so for the hydrogen projects. For the hydrogen, it's slightly different than for electricity. It's a may in that respect. Now, maybe one last thing, if I may, on the financing part, because the cross-border cost allocation was also mentioned. I think what it is important there is to remind ourselves what is the principle behind it. The principle behind it is the beneficiary pays. So all the countries that are involved or are to be involved in the cross-border cost allocation, they are the countries that actually benefit from the project, and therefore they have also to participate within the payment, within the cost, and that it is associated to the project. And this is something that we want with the new TNE to make it hopefully more clear. We included additional principles in the legislation so that things are becoming more visible, and hopefully the CBCA will be used in the right way in the future. I will not maybe say too many others up. Maybe one last thing, if I may. That's again an interesting development within the new TNE, the fact that the projects that actually acquire the PCI PMI label may retain that label under some specific conditions. For example, has already final investment decision, it is already in construction. So this is something that will ease the transition of a project from a list to another, while currently this is not possible. They have to be reassessed every time, and they may in some cases lose their label depending of the benefits that are identified at the European level. So I will stay here. Maybe you mentioned about, the highways and the energy highway element. The energy highways, there are 2 highways, as you already mentioned, for the hydrogen sector. What it is important maybe to highlight with regards to the highway is that it is a more political decision on the choosing of the highways. If we look where they are, we are considering that for those corridors, a stronger political and member state interaction and support is necessary at that point, at this point in time. And that is the reason why they are there. If one would ask, will they be renewed? Would they be extended? I think I cannot express myself as the commission on at this point in time on this. There are many wishes when we talk with the stakeholders, but there's no clarity, or I cannot really confirm or disconfirm any of those elements at this point in time. So maybe I stop here, and happy to hear the other speakers or stakeholders' point of view.
Thanks very much, Irina, and possibly they also will come back with questions to you. Maybe also with a comment. Our next speaker, Olli from Finland, definitely might have a question about the northern dimension of the energy highways. Before presenting you, Olli, to all of the panelists, I would like to ask one question, which is basically, from your perspective, what are the main advances that result from the proposals in the field of permitting, infrastructure, planning, and coordination? So what would you expect from it out of your particular perspective, and how does that compare with what you expected from it? And Olli Sipilä, as the CEO of Gasgrid, has a long experience in the field of gas and transmission and national hydrogen infrastructure and markets, because he's very actively involved there. You previously had an experience from Pöyry Management Consulting, which is really also overlooking data, and you have modeled a lot in the past, and now you are working on it. So, Olli, what is your take, especially on that questions? Did the Commission match your expectation? Olli, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jorko, and thank you, colleagues, for a good, excellent insights coming from the previous presenters. I think probably the main expectation, and I think Anna Störk put it, it's that it's key to have this grid package existing, the recognizing the importance of infrastructure as being a prerequisite of the competitiveness, security of supply, and decarbonization of Europe. I think that's the kind of the big theme of there, and I think the time of where resilience and energy independence are driving forces. I think where I look at it, the Europe has no future in global competition if we rely on fossil fuels. The renewables and clean energy sources are the solutions, and for that you need a infrastructure, logistics, different kind of logistics to match the demand and supply, what is more scattered and so forth. And I'm of course happy, coming from Finland, probably one of the most competitive countries in Europe for hydrogen and its derivatives, that the hydrogen is mentioned first time in that context in there. So really looking keenly on that. What I also welcome, and that's positive signal expectations, is of course on permitting. I actually didn't plan on this, but since we did sort of permitting, Gasgrid is doing the biggest environmental impact assessments of our hydrogen grid in Finland, 1,500 kilometers. And those pieces of paper, as I showed, was 3/5 of our programs of environmental impact assessments. So that's just a program telling how we're gonna do the permitting. So there will be a tens of meetings and much more of big piles of paper done in this permitting phase. So whatever we can accelerate this part in through the delivery cycles, I think we are very much welcoming on that side. On the other hand, the speed, the clarity, there's a bit of a concerns what we already had addressing here is the central scenario planning, top-down planning approach. As you mentioned, Jorgo, in my introduction, I have worked more than 15 years in the management consulting, and part of that was my responsibility was on market modeling and all these scenarios and everything. And I know how hard is to first to build up the capability and then to refine the capability and then doing a value adding work. And what I look now the ENTSOs and connecting the NOH there have last 10 years refined that capability. So my question is that shall we develop something new which takes time, or shall we somehow improve the existing capabilities to gain value and quality and speed in the time when rest of the world is moving extremely fast? So that's something we are comes into my mind, that how we can deliver that. And one item there is that the TSOs has very deep access to different stakeholders. So in addition to knowledge what we have discussed here today, in the access of the stakeholders, their needs are almost changing daily basis. And I can say one thing on our company. If 2 years ago somebody would have said that, okay, you will be planning growing your methane network, I would have said that you probably need to get your kind of a education or even head checked up. However, on last November, we announced that we are investigating on growing our methane network, so current natural gas network, in order to connect biomethane, synthetic methane to the European market, and also enable a flexibility on the electricity generation or in a data center industries. So the world is changing so fast. So these accesses, what the TSOs have, is something I think is becoming more important when we do the transition. And to finalize, perhaps what was missing really there, I would have hoped a bit more on concrete on the de-risking side of especially on the hydrogen, because now you need to do something very transformational, what has been done in the past in the times of 5 to 10 decades. Now we need to do it in 1 or 2 decades. So the de-risking part really requires a very concrete activities. So I was a bit looking for that, but hopefully those marks come out. So those were my key takeaways from the start.
Many thanks to you, Olli. So you represent a TSO. Let's now look into those guys who are basically managing the pipes themselves and understanding how they are connected, what needs to be done to repurpose them, what does it cost. And this is the job of Tilman Wilhelm. He represents, as I said, DVGW, which is the German Gas and Water Association. You are the head of public affairs and communications. You are an expert in communications, of course, and you are also an expert on hydrogen. Tilman, you have been with the Germany's National Organization on Hydrogen Fuel Cells, the NOW, for many years. You were also their first head of communication, so you know how easy it was to sell hydrogen, how difficult it has become, but what needs to be done in order to make this happen in infrastructure. And maybe you want to give your comment here. Tilman, you have the floor.
I can try. Thanks, Jorgo. Thanks also for the opportunity to say a few words on the grids package. As you said, I stand here as representing DVGW, association that sets bindingly the rules for building and operating methane and hydrogen pipelines. And some of the things that have been mentioned in the grids package and earlier by Anna, we've had some experience with here in Germany. So, and I would like to stress maybe 2 of them and then elaborate a little bit. The first one is the equal treatment of energy infrastructure. So the positive thing about the grids package is one single EU level plan for electricity, gas, hydrogen, perfect. But it's also very complex, and that would bring me to the shortcomings. In its complexity, we often forget that at the end of the transformation, when we have been successful and everything is net zero, there will be electrons and molecules. We very often set out at the moment planning only for the electrons. And that is a shortcoming, because by the time hydrogen, as the prime net zero molecule will be available in large quantities, we need the infrastructure and we don't need to rebuild it then. So we have to plan it now. So we should really focus or stress the importance of treating those infrastructures equally. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that you said that in your introduction. Pipeline transport of molecules happens, of course, in the big transport pipelines, but it also happens in the smaller distribution pipelines on a regional level. In Germany, we have about 600 regional DSOs, compared to, I think it's 16 TSOs, which Christoph here represents. In the end, within the reach of those DSOs, we have about 80% of our power plants in Germany and 80% of industry that needs high temperature for their heating processes. So we need to reach them. We need to, at the end, we need hydrogen going through distribution pipelines, arriving at industry, arriving at strengthening local or regional economies. So what I think should be considered very much in the grids package is to involve their view, their perspective. We learned that in Germany quite painfully. You all know that we have the H2 core grid, which is a TSO grid, and it's perfect. It caused a great push and everything is totally positive. But then we had a hard time arguing that we need processes to plan further, to plan into the distribution grid, or at least allow players who are regionally located, who are within the distribution network, to kind of slot into a planning process that allows them to say, look here, my city, my company, we would like to have hydrogen in whatever 2032, 34. Where's the form? Where can I send my letter to? You need a formal process in order to trigger investment. If you don't have that, if you're not part of a political process, of a regulatory process, you can forget about investment. So it was very important that we get within the, how do you call it, the renoveling of the Energiewirtschaftsgesetz, the German law for energy. We will allow such a thing. We will allow a proper political planning of the distribution grid. And I think it would be great if you now start on EU level to do kind of the same, you make a plan for where does the hydrogen pipeline go, to consider that. Like just bring in, we heard Anna talk about, I have to say it sounded like a rather thick governance layer, but maybe that's only to me because I listen to EU talks not that often. So if you just add to that governance layer, add the voice of the DSOs, I think you wouldn't do anything wrong. And you would help, in the end, you would help cities, communes, and industry, which are regionally dispersed or whatever, you would help them to make proper plans for their own future.
Excellent. Let's listen to a TSO. Let's listen to Christoph von den Busche, who represents exactly that kind of thinking, of questioning things. And I might want to mention that goes to Tillmann again, that heating by the German government yesterday has been put again into a new development phase where DSOs might again play a role, but that's totally another discussion, but it's quite actual. Christoph, you are the TSO boss of Gascade, Gas Transport GmbH, but you also have been in December elected as the first president of NOH. The name could have been ENSO-H, like ENSO-G and ENSO-E, but it has another name, the European Networks of Hydrogen. So basically, this comment of Tillmann was a good segue to you. What's your comment on this package?
Yeah, thank you, Jorgo. First of all, I thought it very inspiring when Anna said that it's quite a really enthusiastic time for energy law nerds and it's not only for the political people that this is a very interesting time as well. I think representing the hydrogen TSO, so more or less the Bob the Builder community of hydrogen, and there we see everybody is really highly motivated, and even though all the legislation is not yet implemented as it should have been in all the different countries, we have nearly everybody on board. So everybody dealing with hydrogen on TSO level from 26 countries, and overall 36 hydrogen TSOs being there active. So there's definitely enough motivation and enough energy in the system. I think the grid pact is definitely a step in the right direction. It's a strong step forward to our united European energy infrastructure. And I as well like this advantage we've seen in permitting, and it always sounds so little, but if it says, well, there is an overriding public interest, it's a small step, but it can save you years in developing a new infrastructure project, or these 18-month period which was specified. So I think this can really move things forward much more faster. On the other hand, I'm as well an enthusiast for planning energy lines, not too much being specified. Is it electrons or molecules, and which molecules do we move? My vision is that we really think about an energy system, about energy lines, and don't focus on, okay, let's see what's done by NSOG, by NSOE, or by NO, and but really take the whole picture. And that's why I thought it's a little bit a pity that especially when talking about these advantages in permitting, or this Article 7, where it's pretty much specified on electricity, and therefore I think in the whole package we shouldn't specify too much, doing this for electricity and that for that, but doing the advancement for all our energy vectors. As well, very helpful that at least the spotlight was put on the de-risking needs. And you, Jorgo, already mentioned before in your introduction, we have by far lower financing needs for hydrogen compared to electricity. And I think that's good news. And I think if we move from a model that we want the payment for the financing to only, let's call it a risk insurance, this even can reduce the need for additional money. And I'm thinking here about this de-risking model compared to or closely to this German core grid amortization account. You already mentioned it, where the idea is still customers do pay for the grid. However, it's some state involvement needed, because we have to we're dealing with a nascent infrastructure with anticipatory investments, where simply things like CBC8 don't really work, because the benefit of a not yet really existing market is very hard to determine. And if I think about how much discussions we do have in the electricity sector, well, there you have an established market, you know a lot of things, you have good planning over the years, and still two countries can't agree in a lot of cases. And now for hydrogen, you want a European overarching grid with the corridors, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 countries being teaming up for one of the corridors. Then agreement for a new grid is definitely pretty difficult, and therefore it's more this, let's construct a system where the risk is taken. If you compare it with a house, if you want to buy a house and go to a bank, one thing is getting the money from the bank, getting the bank loan. What the bank will do is they will ask you, okay, if severe things happen in case of disaster, house burns down, who is taking this risk? And that's why you need to prove the fire insurance. If you have the fire insurance, you'll get your home loan. If you can't show a fire insurance, at least in Germany, you don't get a loan for buying a home. And so the system we from the, let's call it hydrogen community, for setting up something completely new would be, let's do the whole financing on a private way, but having the state taking this fire insurance position. And this, I think, with the core grid in Germany works well. So the system helped that the first 400 kilometers of our pipeline to Olli in Finland already has been finished by end of last year. So I think we have a proof of concept there. But for the overarching grid, with different countries being participating in these corridors, these de-risking could help, because you're not talking any longer about who is financing the whole thing, who is paying the home loan, but it's more, how do we share the cost of this risk insurance?
Understood. We will come to that Nordic pipeline in a second when Olli will take the floor for a second time. But before we go there, let's listen from another Finnish European, from Katarina Sikopmani. She is a part-time professor at the Florence School of Regulation, but also a former director at the European Commission, where she was in charge of leading the work on renewables, energy markets, and infrastructure. So basically, she has built everything up that is now in that package. And now she is working as a scholar, also with the Copenhagen School of Energy and with Politecnico Torino, so very, very actively involved, and brings her experience into that world of scholarship. Can you tell us very simply, are you happy with this grid package? Does it correspond to what you were planning all these years, Katarina?
Thanks, Jorgo, for the very nice introduction, and thanks for having me here. I mean, indeed, when looking at the proposal, I looked at the history. So having been there from the 2013 regulation on trans-European networks, so I was looking really at that, and also looking at what have been achieved. And one can say that already more than 100 projects have been completed, to the extent that in the gas sector, it was deemed adequate not to include fossil gas anymore in the scope of the 10E, because the grid was sufficiently well integrated. So quite a lot of achievements already with what we already have in place. So therefore, what I would have expected is continue on this gradual approach. I mean, it has taken more than 10 years to get to where we are today in terms of shaping the methodologies and everything, and from one TYNDP cycle to the other, the TSOs have been working to improve the cycle. So I would have expected more gradual improvements and simplification. And then second, I would definitely have expected more focus on implementation, because that's where we have the challenge. We can have eternal plans, but if the projects are not being implemented, we are missing on our decarbonization targets. So maybe just 2 comments here. So I think Anna put it very nicely in her introduction that there is a lot of confusion of what the Commission actually intends to do. And one of my colleagues in Florence looked at the proposal and found at least 5 different meanings for the word scenario. And I think that's where the discussions are now focusing also on the different understandings of what Commission intends to do. And here, I think what is important for the central scenario is where the Commission can play a very, very important and a very, very useful role is to coordinate. And to coordinate not so much, I would say, the TSOs. I mean, they are there for grid data, etc., but the member states, because the member states are the ones who will tell through the national energy and climate plans how they intend to reach the EU targets, what energy mix they intend to have, how much molecules, what color molecules they intend to have. So I think the role of the Commission in determining what I would call a policy scenario is extremely useful, but it is really to work with the member states to bring the NECPs up to a sufficient quality and sufficiently harmonized, and also looking at the cross-border elements. So I think giving the benefit of the doubt that if this is what the Commission intends to do when developing the scenario, I will give it to my full support. But as I said, there are also hints that the Commission would actually want to do the work of the TSOs. So really going into determining where bottlenecks are and similar. And that's where I would simply say that let's let experts do their work and let Commission do its work. And the Commission is a political organization, not a grid operator. But then the other good elements, which colleagues have already mentioned, relate certainly to permitting, and also the categories on digitalization and more focus on protecting the critical infrastructure. So these are certainly extremely useful elements there. I think I leave it here. I have more to say on the second round and more related to hydrogen as well.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with you in the second round, Katharina? And I would like to ask you also whether, because you were quite clear on two elements of that package, especially on TSO role that should be enhanced, do you expect this to be discussed at the Rotterdam Regulatory Forum? Because you have a lot of experience with this regulatory fora yourself. You were leading some of them for many, many years. So is that the right place to possibly discuss that? I will come to Christoph in a second after you to ask the same question, because it will be his first opportunity. It's the first regulatory forum on hydrogen. So do you expect this to be tackled there and to be dealt with?
I think it is certainly a topic that will be discussed. Whether the Commission puts it on the agenda or not, it will be discussed because you cannot avoid it. It's the right time, it's the right moment, and you will have the right people in the room to discuss all these issues, be it the network operators or be it the regulators or others. So definitely, I think that is a right way, like the other forums will certainly discuss this issue as well.
Okay, that's clear. Christoph, your comment on the regulatory forum, where you will have a leading role, of course, as the president of ENO. Do you expect this to be discussed there? And you were quite diplomatic on that role that the basically Commission wants to have basically on the scenario. Is this something that you are going to address?
Definitely. I think one of the major practical topics is what as well should be addressed. How do we really implement this idea of de-risking, which was mentioned in the grid package, but now we need to anchor it somewhere. It needs to become reality. Therefore, we need to agree whether money comes from the overall budget, whether it's really implemented in 10E, whether currently the CEF, the Connecting Europe facility, as well as reopened the European Competitive Fund is open. So how can we now implement it that it's not only a nice plan and should be done? So give some really solid ground to it. This would be for the de-risking, and I think for the planning, yes, as well. We should have the discussion, and where currently ENO has not been involved, I think we definitely should claim to be involved. On the one hand, we want to have equal footing and joint planning. If I now look to the offshore infrastructure, the pipeline from Germany to Oli, well, it's in the hands of NSOE. So I don't know whether the electricity TSOs are the best to really go for the planning for the offshore hydrogen grids. And there, clearly, I think we will demand this role. And as well, we are open as ENO really to share our knowledge and to involve. And I like to hear from Anna that she said, well, Enno makes the impression that we are maybe more open than somebody else. It's good that really public this comes to the public, because we really try to involve more. We try to work more together as well in the planning process with academia. This starts with the type of software which is selected, and therefore we definitely will try to bring our share to the table, but these definitely will be topics which should be discussed in Rotterdam.
Let's go to Olli, because you alluded with your pipeline already to him. And Olli, I've two questions basically. One has to do with that amortization model from Germany, whether you think, because we don't see this de-risking element in other countries yet, it's a good model. But the second question I have, do you see any missed opportunities in the decision not to include the Nordic-Baltic hydrogen corridor among Europe's energy highways? Because that was, to me, also quite a surprise. Is that a missed opportunity?
Well, let's put the perspective of the let's say Nordic-Baltic area in totality. I think this area, the region, has a strong track record being a forerunner in a cross-border energy infrastructure. I think since the 90s, if you look at the Nordic electricity market, it's probably one of the most integrated, clean, and competitive in the world. And if taking some recent, end of the last decade, development of the Finnish Baltic gas market integration has really proven ourselves that we really kind of went through extreme scenarios from the external shocks we have encountered. Of course, everything has been done at the support of for example, the 10E CEF funding. So this European cooperation we have put in action in extremely good results, both in the good times and also in the extreme shock times. And when it comes to the hydrogen, we have, beyond our domestic needs, massive renewable electricity potential, which is in a short lead time to be built. There's a lot of industrial capabilities that we can deliver in both of hydrogen or its derivatives. So the potential is there to deliver what we are intending here. So of course we actually doing, as I showed there with the permitting and all that, we are doing that. So what we see that it's of course we are missing the visibility and what we get or could have gotten from the energy highways. So that's one item. Although we have understood that these energy highways do not replace the PCI and other kind of ongoing core processes of the European grid development. So I think that's something hopefully stays there, that it's kind of an addition, but not a something that will replace. So we are kind of confident. But it's good to clarify during this process on that. But I think all in all, our region, every country here, Finland and the Nordics and the Baltic Sea region, together with Poland and Germany, as Christoph said, that we are working in across the region extremely. So we are continuing and let the details sort them out. And as you put out, one of the detail is the financing and de-risking. Our expectation is that it will be developed during the time when we need. So let's do the permitting and joint planning and all that in the meantime, and let's create a solution for that. I think the German amortization account is a very good example how you kind of create a structure which manages of different risk of different stakeholders in one way. So that's a good example. So I think we should really look in the European level. Will that fit as a one way to go, or should there be some multiple choices? So, but I think the European level structure should really speed up the development.
Well, one speed element is permitting and overriding interests, overriding public interests. I would like to go to Tilman, because Germany, for instance, has classified hydrogen projects as being of overriding public interest. and I talked about that acceleration law that makes this crystal clear. However, this is not the case here in the grids package. The grids package solidifies this classification only for electricity projects, but not necessarily for hydrogen ones. Do you think this is something that should be modified, even also based on the German experience and lessons learned?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. What I meant earlier when I said we have to make sure to treat energy infrastructures equally. In fact, this afternoon, I believe the Committee on Energy and Economy in the German Bundestag, in the Federal Parliament, has approved the Hydrogen Acceleration Act. And it states that, now let me think, that of overriding interests are hydrogen pipelines, hydrogen production sites, hydrogen storage, and facilities to import hydrogen. And yes, of course, overriding public interest means you come in before other societal interests. It also means you have to file less reports. You also get approval quicker. And all that consequently means easier access to money and investment and decisions to invest. So on a European level, that's the question you asked me. You need it doesn't go without it that you have equal treatment of energy infrastructures. That is definitely a must. And the other must, I'm sorry, I would also like to stress that again. I also mentioned that earlier. It's sort of it's that DSO point that I made earlier, because I just want to make sure that my message stays here in the room, because it's really important. If you make a European scenario and an energy infrastructure scenario, at some point you have to know what the real demand is on site. And the guys who know the real demand on site are the DSOs. So that is why you need in your big governance thing, you need a little box for the DSOs and bring them in and hear them sometimes. And I hope I answered your question with the Acceleration Act. We're very happy that it came through today. You know yourself, it's dire times for hydrogen. We need good news, and that was good news today. The same as it was good news yesterday when they sort of refurbished that heating act that went wrong with the old government.
Absolutely, it's a refurbishment, and it contains or entails a big role for hydrogen. Thanks, Tilman. That answered my question. So possibly German MEPs can influence a little bit the debate on that, because this overriding interest for hydrogen as well should be part of European grids package. That brings me to Irina. So we have only a few minutes, but Irina, maybe you want to have some final comment on looking ahead. What steps should we expect that after this discussion also we had here today, the European Commission takes to further support hydrogen infrastructure deployment? Big question, few seconds only.
Yes, many things were said, and thank you very much for this webinar, because I noted down a lot of ideas and perspectives. Now, on the way forward, we put forward a lot of legislation. TENI is now in discussion. We expect it, let's say, to be final end of this year. So we have the legal framework here. I think what is important now is to really focus on the implementation. And when I mean implementation, I'm looking at the member states to actually implement the legislation in due time. I'm talking also about the TSOs to focus a lot on the implementation, also at the national level. I'm also looking at the consistency across the sectors that we need to really work out, and not only at the European, but between the European, national, and also DSO level, because the gases regulation also looks at that level of planning. And what I'm looking for overall is the as a society and stakeholders to really work together so that these projects are to be implemented. The forums were mentioned. The Rotterdam Forum will come. The Copenhagen Forum. We had the discussions on de-risking. This is one element that for sure the Commission will further look into. We mentioned it in our communication. And so GNNOH have the task to actually develop a report on de-risking. And what I kindly ask, based on the discussions that we have seen today on the de-risking, I kindly ask to look at the de-risking as options, tools, of elements that could be combined together. I would avoid to focus on one element or one solution, because we know from our experience, there's no one solution for the entire Europe, and it's important in discussion on de-risking to really have the flexibility. Now, on our side as the Commission, we definitely will discuss with the member states, and we continually discussing with the member states on the implementation. The energy highways, as I mentioned, they have more political supports behind that, and we're going to discuss even further with the member states and cooperate further also with the regulatory authorities to actually have those highways properly implemented. So we as a Commission, once we finalize the legal framework, we really focus on the implementation and count on all of us, in fact, to really support the project moving forward. I noted down all the ideas that came forward, what needs to be further improved in the package. We'll see how the Council and the Parliament will react within the negotiation. And let's be optimistic. And I like Anna's optimism. Let's be optimistic that actually the TENI is a good way forward. We can improve it in the level of clarifications with regards to what it is in there, and let's have also this European planning up and running, so that we have the grids that are necessary and the hydrogen infrastructure that is necessary for the future.
Thanks very much. We are always optimistic, and thanks for taking note of so many ideas that have been presented here. Looking forward to the next steps, and of course meet you all in Rotterdam at the forum there. So thanks for this very interesting hydrogen talk today. I would like to already highlight the next upcoming hydrogen talk, which is on Tuesday, 24th of March, again from 3 to 4:30. This will be about another infrastructure related to hydrogen. That's the alternative fuel infrastructure regulation for hydrogen in mobility. And we don't talk only about the infrastructure, but also about the funding. AFIF, that's the fund, and AFIR, that's the infrastructure regulation for the future of hydrogen mobility. So meet you all 24th of March. And last but not least, don't forget to book your booth for the big European exposition and conference on hydrogen at European Hydrogen Week 2026, end of October, here in Brussels. That's all for today. Thanks very much for your attention, for your participation, and see you in March. Bye-bye.